want to talk to you a little bit about the relevance of XBRL at the FASB and the role of XBRL at the FASB, which is not always apparent to a lot of people. Some people would debate whether XBRL even belongs at the FASB. To me, it's always made sense that a taxonomy that reflects a subject matter belongs within the organization that's responsible for it. And so in that sense, it makes sense that it belongs at the FASB. And so just that proximity to the standard setters allows us to be more efficient and effective at what we do. But at the end of the day, there's got to be more than that. So I'm going to get out of the box a little bit here and really talk a bit about how XBRL is changing the way we think about standard setting. So one of my favorite shows today is a show called The Link on National Geographic Channel. Anybody watch The Link? If you're an XBRL geek, you should be watching this show. The Link is about how innovations that we have today have their roots in innovations thousands of years ago. So we've all heard the stories about how the invention of the printing press changed navigation on the waterways, right? We haven't heard this story before, Eric? So when the printing press was invented, or prior to the printing press, you would go out on the seaways and you'd have your maps, and when you saw something that was different than what was on the map, you wrote it down. Well, you had to come back. You'd have to have that scribed on everybody else's maps as they came back in, and so it went. When we had the printing press, all those maps got run off the press, and it dramatically sped up navigation. I can't believe you guys have not heard this story before. Well, that's the sort of thing. So if you haven't watched the show, it's really a great show. They've gone through some fascinating stories. One of the other ones I picked out, just as an example, and there's hundreds of these. So the compass was invented by the Chinese. Do you know what it was invented for? Any guesses? Feng Shui. They used it to position the house so that it was in harmony with the environment. Hey! Thank you. So I told you I was going to get a little bit out of the box. When I worked at the AICPA, Barry would go, I started about the same time Barry did back in the day, and he used to go around the halls and he'd talk to the directors and say, so have you thought outside the box today? Sounds like Barry, right? He'd come to my office and he'd say, Lois, have you found the box yet? So I'm not prepared to make quite the associations that have been made in the link, nor am I smart enough to do that. But there are a lot of obvious innovations and disruptive technologies today that have a lot of bearing on what we do, and they have a lot of influence in what we're doing in this space. One of my, this is my new toy, this iPad, so I'm just starting to get acquainted with it. And so I'm getting into all the iPad apps. And one of my new favorite apps is the NOAA High-Def Radar. So if you've not subscribed to this, I don't know if it's free, if it's $2, whatever, but it's definitely worth it if you watch weather at all. And so with this app, I can virtually get instant information on weather in my area or any place. I've got live radar that you can see with a 5-minute update. This is real-time reporting directly from the creator to you, right? The creator to you. And when I think, thank you, Eric, when I think about what we're trying to do with XBRL, we're trying to make a direct connection from the creator of the financial information to the user. And so here's a real app out there that people are familiar with. Now, it's possible I might misinterpret this data, but I can't imagine I would do much worse than an average weather forecaster nowadays. And we can plan, our trips and our day around it much, much more effectively than we would have done otherwise. So it's a very useful tool. It creates this direct connection between the creator of the information and the user without any misinterpretation or normalizing of the data. And how about Twitter feeds? So we have these what do we call these things? I just call them hash totals, hashtags. hash totals, my gosh. We have these hashtags now where you can follow just about anything you want to follow. And so what about, tweeter feeds for earthquakes and tornado warnings? Seismic waves travel at 3 to 5 kilometers per second. Fiber optic communications travel at the speed of 200,000 kilometers per second. That is a huge difference. And so when we had this earthquake down here in Virginia, so up in Norwalk, Connecticut, we felt something weird. The ivory tower was shaking a little bit, but we just, didn't know what that was for sure. Got on Facebook, got on Twitter, we knew immediately what had happened. It's amazing that these signals, this communication, is actually faster than the traditional ways that we're used to. This is real-time reporting, unlike anything we're familiar with. If I lived in a tornado-prone region, I'd subscribe to one of these services. I'd want my iPad or my phone going off immediately if something was going on. Twitter's tagline should be, faster than a speeding earthquake. Come on, guys. iTunes and other similar online services, are there any other similar online services? Have transformed the music industry. Customers, once limited by the physical medium, can now buy just what they want and store it in an easy-to-retrieve database. How many of you remember 8 tracks? No, that's more than I expected. So with 8 tracks, if you wanted to find a location in the track, you'd have to go fast forward or go back. I mean, most of the time you just didn't worry about it. You just played it and hope for the best. You don't have to do that anymore. I mean, you can create a database. You've got your playlist. You can set it up the way you want to get all the information when you want and how you want to get it. The other useful feature that we have today is the user ratings. So not just iTunes, but Amazon. You have the ability to see how other people feel about that particular work. Data Dynamite has very positive ratings on Amazon, I just saw. So that's good news for, sorry, David. But not everybody likes iTunes. Artists aren't completely thrilled with it. They create an album, they create this artistic work, but you only want track 3. They don't like that. They want you to buy the whole thing. They want you to take it as a whole. Where have we heard that before? Taken as a whole. But guess what? Everybody doesn't want the whole thing. They just want pieces of it. I just want to know about return on assets. I don't care about the other piece. This is the world we live in. The customer user gets to do what they want, and we can't fully anticipate their needs. Better to just give them the data as complete as we can and leave the rest to them. That's the analyst's job. Amazon and iTunes have one other very important similarity, amongst others, that location in the traditional sense is irrelevant. Now, both of them can do different things to promote their product and match their product, match different products to your user profile, but it has nothing to do with the traditional location that we think of in a brick or mortar type location. Location, at the end of the day, location is irrelevant in the internet. It's all about the metadata. And most importantly, every user can create their own custom profile that makes best use of that metadata for their requirement. In a presentation-centric world, location is important, but XBRL is not about presentation. It is about the data and its underlying relationships to other data. Amazon and iTunes and others have turned this idea on their head. They have taken the idea, the maxim of location, 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 and it's now should be metadata, metadata, metadata. Granted, it doesn't have quite the same ring to it, but we'll get over it. And then there's Facebook. As an investor, you must consider a broad swath of other information that's available to you, whether it's Facebook or it's Twitter. It's where people group together. And you need to follow those groups to understand the trends in whatever industry you're following. And then YouTube, with cameras everywhere. I mean, this is all of these things are really global phenomena, but it seems to play out with YouTube in a way that somewhat different than the others. You know, you can post a video. You know, videos have no language barrier, so you can really post it, and you can get the flavor of it without maybe understanding it. But it really has had a phenomenal effect. In some respects, it's kind of scary. You know, how many people here today have a video camera on them? Everybody in this room. I think I've got 3. This has 2. My phone has 1, and that's only because it's old technology. You know, that's amazing and scary at the same time, because God forbid you do something that draws attention to yourself, and you might not be happy about it later on when you find it up on Facebook. But then the flip side of that, you know, we've all heard the story about the bullied bus monitor, right? This poor woman that was being bullied by some teenagers from Eric's neck of the woods. Now she's $600,000 richer. Bully me, please. This is the world we live in, and these innovations and disruptive forces are as much, if not more so, responsible for the transformation of financial reporting, more so than anything we do directly. I mean, there's a lot of things we're doing to try and keep pace with financial reporting, but the reality is all of these innovations, all these disruptions are changing the world we live in and how information is being shared. Prior to the internet, the common way to get financial statements was you'd go to the SEC's reading room, or you'd send an email. You'd send a letter, or you make a phone call to the public company, and they'd send you an annual report by the U.S. Postal System. Anyone notice that the post office is slowly going out of business? It's a slow death. And there were subscription services back in the day that delivered company financial statements on disk or CDs, but that was hardly real time. You'd get it, there was a quarterly update process. And then starting in the early 90s, the SEC made a huge leap forward with the Edgar system, putting filings online. It was every bit as controversial as XBRL is today. But prior to XBRL, those Edgar filings were largely just electronic paper, just an electronic rendering of the printed page. Really hadn't, it sped up the delivery process, but we were still dealing with the same paradigm, that same presentation paradigm. An XBRL formatted document is more like a portable database, and that's the way to think about it. It's where relationships and metadata are the most relevant portions, and we're pushing the presentation into the background. Here's some stats just to keep in mind. We now have approximately 10,000 companies filing with the SEC using XBRL. That's 10,000, just under 10,000 companies filing XBRL exhibits. We have over 43,000 individual filings in the system, and that represents roughly 21 million discrete facts. I did a rough projection yesterday, and in 5 years, we will have in excess of 200 million discrete facts in the system. 200 million discrete facts with 5 years, more than 5 years of trends, because it goes back 3 years. That's amazing transformation in the system, and it's something for any analyst to be very, very excited about. Now, much as iTunes has allowed music lovers to repackage the music to their liking, now analysts can do the same thing more readily and more efficiently. Now, they've always done this before, but it's a much more efficient process now. All these innovations set market expectations, as well as establishing an IT platform available to all of us. So again, all these different things I'm talking about here today, is what the market expects. Analysts rely on far more than what is contained in their financial statements. The financial statements that we're focused on today is just a small piece of what they look at. They tell us that they shred the entire 10K, the entire Q, and then they track the other SEC filings as well. So all of that's very important to them. And moreover, they rely on a lot more information than what they find in these statements outside of the Ks and the Qs. So again, the Facebooks and all these other things, they're tracking information that they're able to pick up there. The internet has literally opened the floodgates for data and information consumption. Analysts regularly mash this data together from a multitude of sources. Another example that I like to point to, how many of you used OpenTable to make a restaurant reservation? Yeah, quite a few. So that is a database of real-time reservations. Now, if you were tracking, if you were tracking stocks for restaurant chains, wouldn't it be nice to know somebody's got access to that information? Or if you're just trying to track, trends with consumers and different types of eating establishments, very, very useful information to have. I'd love to know what the owner of this enterprise is doing with that information. Couldn't find it on the website. Additionally, analysts reconstitute that information in ways only they know or appreciate. We like to think that the asset we put on the balance sheet and the liabilities and equity we put on the balance sheet is meaningful. Those are hash totals, guys. Users have a different idea of what constitutes assets, liabilities, equity, income, OCI. A lot of analysts don't even know what OCI is. But they reconstitute all that information to meet what they think to form it in a means that they think is most meaningful to them. So in summary, I want to characterize the challenges to standard setting as follows. So we're in this paradigm shift with one foot in the print PDF space and another foot in this electronic media where we're going from presentation-centric to data-centric. And that's the reality of where we are from a standard setting perspective. That you can't just flip a switch and go from one to the other because your constituent's not all there. So we have to deal with that. But we're shifting this narrative from this presentation view to this data-centric view. And it's a process. But the old maxim, location, 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 is no longer true. When we look at a financial statement and we talk about a financial statement, we need to dig down and really ask the question when someone says, well, gee, I want this thing on the income statement. I want this reported on the income statement. You have to ask why. What is it you're trying to emphasize? For years in the XBRL space, we talked about the geography of the statement. But what we really meant is tell me about the relationship of the items. It's not really location I care about. I'm going to jump ahead here because I know I'm chewing through too much of my time here. But that's one of the key concepts that we have to focus on. The other is this, again, the point I made about assets equals liabilities plus equity. To the consumer of that data, it's really not much more than a hash total. It's expected as an accountant. We expect it to be there. I mean, what righteous accountant wouldn't expect the balance sheet and the income statement to add up? But the consumer of this information is going to look at that differently. And we need to recognize that the consumers of the information don't always want all of it. They may start with all of it, but after they shred the documents and they shred the information, they're going to be looking for specific pieces. And we need to make sure that we've provided the information that allows them to do that, as opposed to suggesting that they have to take it as a whole. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I think my final point here is that we need to have a better understanding of our role in the semantic web. Financial information is important, but it's just one piece of the whole picture. Analysts and other users of data are mashing all these different sources together, and this is just one piece, and we need to understand that in that context of that bigger picture. Thank you.